It all started with something that should have been simple and drama-free, a pool party. My family had been planning this get-together for weeks. The weather was perfect, the grill was ready, and the guest list was just a handful of close friends and family. It was meant to be a private, relaxed weekend afternoon, a break from the constant HOA nonsense that seemed to plague my neighborhood. But there was one major problem. Her name was Karen. Karen was the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA. Despite not actually having any real power beyond being the loudest person at meetings, she acted like she ruled over the entire community. She was the type of person who believed that if she didn't approve of something, it shouldn't be happening at all. And when she got wind of my private pool party, she lost her mind. The day before the party, I was outside setting up the poolside furniture, adjusting the outdoor speakers, and preparing some decorations when I heard a loud fake cough behind me. I turned around, and there she was, Karen, in all her entitled glory. She stood at the edge of my property, arms crossed, sunglasses on, wearing that smug, I'm about to ruin your day expression she always had. I heard you're throwing a pool party tomorrow, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. I nodded. Yeah, private party. Just some friends and family. Karen's eyes narrowed. Well, that's actually against the HOA rules. I blinked. No, it's not. Karen smiled like she had already won. Actually, it is. You see, large gatherings must be approved by the HOA board, and as a board member, I was never given any request for this event. I stared at her in disbelief. Karen, this is my private property. The pool is in my backyard. It has nothing to do with HOA. She shook her head dramatically. It doesn't matter. The noise, the traffic, the disruption, it affects the entire neighborhood. And as a board member, I cannot allow that. You need to cancel the party immediately. I almost laughed. Karen really thought she could dictate what I did on my own property. Yeah, that's not happening, I said, turning back to my decorations. Karen gasped like I had just committed a crime. Excuse me? You do realize I can fine you for this? If you go through with this party, I will be reporting you to the HOA. I shrugged. Go ahead. But just so you know, my property isn't actually under HOA jurisdiction. That was when Karen's face twitched. She had forgotten that little fact. Karen stormed off, and I figured that was the end of it. But oh no. Karen was not one to give up that easily. That evening, a neighbor texted me with a screenshot of a sudden emergency HOA rule change proposal. New rule proposal. Any large private gatherings involving 10 or more guests must be approved by the HOA at least 30 days in advance. No exceptions. It was so obvious what she was trying to do. Karen had just invented a rule out of nowhere, hoping to enforce it against me before the party even happened. She had no authority to do this, but that wasn't going to stop her from trying. The next morning, I woke up to something even worse. There was a bright red notice taped to my front door. Notice of violation. Your scheduled event has been deemed non-compliant with HOA regulations. You are hereby ordered to cancel the gathering or face fines and legal action. Signed, of course, by Karen. This was war, and I wasn't about to let Karen win. I did a little digging into the HOA rules. It turns out that Karen's newly invented rule had not been officially passed. HOA rules required a full vote from the board, plus a written notice sent out to homeowners before enforcement, which meant her little notice on my door. Completely meaningless. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I wrote my own letter, printed multiple copies, and taped them all over the neighborhood. Attention homeowners. It has come to my attention that an HOA board member is attempting to enforce a rule that has not been officially voted on or approved. Any threats of fines or legal action regarding private events on private property are invalid. Do not be intimidated by unlawful HOA overreach. See HOA bylaws for confirmation. Enjoy your weekend. Karen's reaction was priceless. I watched from my front porch as she stormed around the neighborhood, trying to tear down every copy of my letter. It was too late. Everyone had seen it. Neighbors were texting me, laughing about the whole thing, calling Karen out on Facebook, and even tagging the HOA president to clarify the rules. Karen's plan had officially backfired. And the best part, The party was still happening. At exactly 1 p.m., just as guests were starting to arrive, Karen showed up at my front gate with a clipboard, sunglasses, and an attitude. She pointed at me like she was giving a royal decree. "This event is unauthorized. I am shutting this down." I grinned. "Karen, I'd love for you to do that. But see, I have a question for you. If my party is unauthorized, then who exactly authorized this?" I stepped aside, revealing something Karen wasn't expecting. The HOA president and two other board members, holding plates of barbecue. One of them raised a beer in Karen's direction. "Hey, Karen, want a hot dog?" Karen's face turned a deep shade of red. What? You can't. You're supposed to." The HOA president cut her off. "Karen, we're here as guests. And last I checked, we're not a dictatorship. We can't ban someone from using their own backyard." Karen looked like she was about to explode. She opened her mouth to argue, but realized she had no allies. Nobody supported her. Nobody cared about her fake rule. And worst of all, nobody was taking her seriously anymore. The party went on as planned. And Karen, she stormed back to her house in utter defeat. After Karen's humiliating failure to cancel my party, I thought she would take the loss and just stew in her own bitterness. But I vastly underestimated her level of entitlement. Karen wasn't done. She was furious that I had publicly embarrassed her, that the HOA president himself had basically told her to sit down and be quiet, and that my party was going on without a hitch. So she did what any irrational HOA Karen would do. She called the cops. About an hour into the party, my backyard was alive with laughter, music, and the sizzle of food on the grill. My friends were in the pool, my cousins were chatting near the patio, and even the HOA president was enjoying himself. That's when I noticed Karen standing on her porch, talking animatedly on her phone. At first, I ignored her. But then I saw her pointing toward my house, waving her arms wildly, looking like she was explaining some major emergency. And then I heard sirens. Within minutes, 2 police cars pulled up in front of my house. I saw the cops step out, glance around, and then exchange a look of utter confusion. There was no crime scene. There was no disturbance. There was just a normal backyard party. Karen, however, practically sprinted toward them. "Officers, thank goodness you're here. This homeowner is violating multiple HOA rules." The cops stared at her like she was insane. One of them slowly pulled out a notepad. "Ma'am, you called the police over an HOA rule?" Karen nodded aggressively. "Yes. He's throwing an unauthorized event. He refused to cancel it even after receiving a violation notice. I demand that you shut it down immediately." The officers looked at each other again. Then one of them sighed. "Ma'am, HOA rules are not legally enforceable by the police." Karen's face twitched. But he's breaking the rules. Look at all these people. The noise, the chaos." The second officer raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, this is a private residence. This is not a public disturbance. This is not a crime." Karen stomped her foot. "But the HOA rules state." "Ma'am, the police do not enforce HOA rules." The tone in the officer's voice was clear. This was a waste of their time. But Karen, being Karen, didn't know when to quit. Realizing the police weren't going to back her up, Karen switched tactics. She took a deep, theatrical breath and put on her best innocent victim face. "Officer, please. You don't understand. I feel incredibly unsafe. There are so many people here. They could be doing illegal things. I think I saw alcohol. There might be underage drinking." The officer pinched the bridge of his nose. "Ma'am, is there any actual evidence of a crime happening here?" Karen flashed a smug look, thinking she had just nailed me. "Why don't you go inside and check?" That's when I finally stepped forward. "Actually, officers, I'd love for you to check something first." I pulled out my phone, scrolled to my security camera footage, and hit play. On the screen, clear as day, was Karen standing on her porch minutes earlier, smirking as she told someone over the phone. "I don't care if it's not a real emergency. Just to why there's underage drinking." That'll make them come faster. The officer's expression shifted instantly. They turned to Karen, who immediately went pale. Ma'am, did you just make a false emergency call? Karen started stammering. No. It was just, look, I thought I saw something. I was just trying to protect the neighborhood. The first officer pulled out his citation pad. Ma'am, do you know that making a false emergency call is a crime? Karen gasped. Wait, you can't seriously be. The officer began writing. You're being fined for misuse of emergency services. If you call 911 for a non-emergency again, you could face criminal charges. Karen looked like she was about to explode. She turned to me, pointing angrily. This is your fault. You set me up. I grinned. No, Karen, you did this to yourself. The cops handed her the fine and walked away. Karen stood frozen on her porch, shaking with rage. Meanwhile, my party continued without a single problem. And Karen, she was now $500 poorer thanks to her own stupidity. After Karen's embarrassing defeat with the police, I was certain she would take the loss and leave me alone. But no, Karen doesn't learn. If anything, her humiliation only made her more determined to win in some way. And what's the most Karen thing to do after failing to weaponize the police? Try to get the HOA to punish me. A few days later, I got a notice in my mailbox. The HOA had scheduled an emergency meeting regarding a violation of community standards. The topic? Me. More specifically, my disruptive and unsanctioned pool party. I actually laughed when I saw it. This had Karen's fingerprints all over it. But I decided I wasn't going to just sit back and let her dictate the narrative. So I prepared. When I walked into the HOA meeting, Karen was already seated front and center, smug as ever. The room was filled with a mix of homeowners, HOA board members, and even a few of my neighbors who had attended my party. The HOA president stood up. We've received the complaint that a homeowner recently held a disruptive, unsanctioned event that violated HOA regulations. He looked directly at Karen. Karen, you requested this meeting. Would you like to present your case? Karen stood up dramatically, flipping through a folder like she was a lawyer about to present a Supreme Court case. She cleared her throat. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a serious problem in this neighborhood. Our community is supposed to be a peaceful, rule-abiding place. And yet, this man decided to throw a massive, disruptive, and illegal party with no regard for our guidelines. She pointed directly at me. There was loud music. There were people coming and going at all hours. The noise levels were unacceptable. And worst of all, she paused dramatically. He called the police on me out of spite. That's when I knew she had completely lost her grip on reality. The room fell silent. Even the HOA president blinked in confusion. Karen, you called the police. Karen froze. Then she quickly regained her composure. I had to, because he was breaking HOA rules. And now, thanks to his false accusations, I've been unfairly fined. This HOA needs to take action against him instead. I leaned back in my chair amused. Then I stood up. Karen, let me ask you something. If my party was so illegal, why did the HOA president attend? The entire room turned to the HOA president, who casually nodded. Karen's face twitched. That doesn't mean anything. That was a mistake. He shouldn't have been there. The HOA president sighed. Karen, I was there. There was nothing disruptive. No rules were broken. The noise was well within acceptable levels. And as we've told you before, the HOA does not have the power to control what homeowners do on their private property. Karen started sputtering. But this isn't fair. I did everything right. You should be punishing him, not me. I grinned. Karen, you called the police with a false emergency claim. You wasted city resources. You disrupted the peace far more than my party ever did. And now you want the HOA to punish me for a completely legal gathering. Karen was now beet red. She looked around, desperate for support. But the HOA members were already shaking their heads. The HOA president sighed. Karen, this meeting is over. We will not be taking action against him. And if you continue filing frivolous complaints, you will be fined for harassment. Karen looked like she was about to explode. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. Then, she grabbed her things and stormed out. The HOA members muttered among themselves, some laughing quietly. I just sat back and enjoyed the show. You think after 3 consecutive losses, Karen would just give up. But no, because the next morning, I woke up to find a nasty note taped to my door. In big, angry handwriting, it read, "Enjoy your little victory, but I'm watching you. You're ruining this neighborhood. Just wait. You won't get away with this forever." It was honestly pathetic. So I did what any normal person would do. I took a picture of the note, printed it out, and put it in a nice frame. I hung it up in my living room as a trophy. Because at the end of the day, Karen lost. She tried to ruin my party. She tried to get the police to shut it down. She tried to turn the HOA against me. She tried to threaten me. And she failed. Every single time. If you ever find yourself dealing with a Karen, remember this. Logic won't stop them. Reason won't stop them. The only thing that will stop a Karen is their own stupidity. And Karen, she played herself.